Hey.
What's up? What's up, everybody? What's up, Mike?
Up here in Julian, enjoying the nice cool air.
Enjoying some chamomile, some co-chamomiles. Let's just jump right in. So Corey and I did a podcast yesterday and asked questions and then weren't able to get to them. So now they're for us.
All right.
Okay, so interestingly, it's a very technical question from my buddy old pal from Biola, Angel Ramirez Jr. So that's at A Ramirez.Jr. How do you go from having an okay studio to a professional studio? In parentheses, how do you go about buying gear in the beginning of your career since gear is expensive? P.S. You two rock. So me and Corey rock.
Yeah, okay.
It's still, the jury's out whether or not you rock.
The distinction there.
So this is an interesting question because I'll feel guilty if I mention a bunch of expensive gear because of what you said, but you mentioned going from an okay studio to a professional studio. So there's an inevitable amount of investment you have to make. But what would be the minimum investment? When I think about that, I think about signal chain. So I would go with, let's look at the whole spectrum. You have the things you're going to record and then where it's going to end up. So you have your gear from basically microphone all the way to your software. So where do you start? Where do you end up? And what's in between? And how pro can you make it? And how streamlined? And I would say that Pro Tools is my go-to as the program. And then Logic is less expensive, maybe slightly less industry standard, but that's changing. I think because it's less expensive and because of certain technological advancements, lots of younger people over the last, I guess, 5 years have dove into Logic because Apple, I guess, owns it now. And it's become just a low-hanging fruit, I think. So a lot of people are doing stuff on that.
I have a more of a layperson's answer to this question.
Yeah.
It's not going to be specific about what gear to buy,
Okay.
Obviously, but I think the first thing I thought of when I heard the question was if you can tell what you've used in the end result, I'd say there's probably a technique and a procedure you want to look at that should be on your radar, like a red flag. Like if I know that preset or I know that sound, I know what that is. And then challenging yourself that I guess in some way I'm trying to say is that maybe it doesn't matter after a certain point. The gear doesn't matter. What matters most is, I know that's weird. That's a weird answer. And you can poke holes in all this, but the end result has to be your intention. What sound, what aesthetic was your intention, and did you achieve it?
Yeah.
Then success, like that. Then you've done what you wanted to do, and I think
doesn't matter what you use to get there.
If the gear is in the way of you getting the sound that you want, then that's the one you take a look at.
Or if it's putting such an indelible stamp on it that then your intention is getting watered down, or there's not enough of you in it. Yeah. You know, the reason why I laughed is because when I read that question, the first thing I thought of was this little joke phrase that you hear engineers talk about, which is like, it's not the tool, it's the fool. So it's like, it's who's using the gear that matters, not what the gear is. You can use mediocre gear.
Up to a certain point.
Yeah, obviously. But, I mean, there are big pop records, for example, and that were recorded all on, like, making samples on the iPhone voice note recorder. And I've done that a few times, like, just recorded things out, you know, on location, and then mess with them a bunch. But
I think the context could be, too, that like, if they were to re-ask the question, is non-novelty.
Yeah,
some of that stuff is obviously, I mean, you can do anything. Go out in a playground and record a swing set.
Totally. So I would think that, you know, going with something that is somewhat industry standard, first of all, there's a reason why it became industry standard. And second of all, it makes you more, your interactivity with other people in the industry easier. So if you're on Logic or Pro Tools, then it's more likely that you can take your session and work with somebody else. So that, I would say that go with Pro Tools or Logic. And then in terms of the concept behind the gear side is you want the best mic you can afford. You want to use great cables, which is no small thing, because you can hear a difference between a crappy cable and a really good cable, especially accumulatively. So, and then your preamp is super important, and then your digital conversion. And basically what I'm getting at is if you have one great signal chain into your DAW, your digital audio workstation, Pro Tools or Logic, that's the key to the professional studio. And what gets really expensive is if you want to mic up drums with 10 to 12 mics. And so then you need 10 to 12 times that. But when I started out, we had one good mic, one good preamp, and two great levels of two great people. Two great we had Apogee digital conversion. So we had the first preamp we had was an Avalon 737. It's like a tube mic pre that I still own, but I don't use it very often. And then our one mic at the time was a Neumann TLM 103, which is like a $800-ish mic, really good condenser mic. And so you have that one signal chain, so you can record acoustic guitars really well, electric guitars really well, vocals really well, anything that you want to throw one mic on. And then I would say professional studio, you can get really great drum sounds if you make your own samples with that one mic or whatever. But if you have two channels of great conversion, great preamps, and two great mics, you can actually get great drum sounds because you just record overheads or rooms, fly in samples to lock in with the performance of the snares and kicks and toms, and you're off and running to a pretty high level. So when it comes to conversion, if I was going to get specific, I would go, Apogee or Universal Audio. So, the Apogee, what do I have here? The Duet, which is what we're recording the podcast with. That's solid conversion. It's not the best you can get, but it's really good. And then same with Universal Audio Apollo. And if you want to get higher end, you can go like into Burl or, higher end Apogee stuff. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I would imagine that you don't have to do everything yourself either. Like if you have a network of people where drums can be done somewhere else, where actually mastering and getting that final mix can be done somewhere else.
Right.
Imagine you could be pretty resourceful with creating a network of people that have different specialties and different gear. So
you absolutely can, but I would also say that you're more empowered as a musician these days if you really try to be a jack of all trades in that sense, because the I don't know if I would say the bar has been lowered, but I guess it's been raised in a sense that like before you couldn't get competitive mastering unless you really went to a mastering guy that had a mastering console, the best of EQs and whatever, and half-inch tape and all this stuff. But now the plugins have gotten so good that it really is, it's the fool using it. It's like, how do you really know how to get something loud but not distorted? And do you know what a final mix sounds like? If you can do that yourself and you know it when you hear it, so that if you do know it when you hear it, then there's got to be, you can be taught how to get that result.
Yeah, and I think to look at professionalism or just the concept of a professional quality studio, perhaps thinking of it in terms of tiers, that you don't have to do all the tiers at once.
Right.
And you make that first tier, like you said, is the
one great signal chain.
And then there's the next tier. But I mean, you can, in the meantime, while you're waiting to achieve the subsequent tiers, you're networking.
Yeah. Get that one signal path that's top quality. And these mics we're using right now, there's incredibly famous right now because a lot of people use them for podcasts, but it's one of the most well-known mics Apart from the SM57, which is a great like instrument mic, snare mic, guitar amp mic, this is the SM7. These are roughly $400, and it's probably the least expensive best mic ever made, I would even say. Like Michael Jackson is famous for having sung on this microphone for great stuff. James Hetfield of Metallica, Red Hot Chili Peppers vocals. They sound great on kick drums. They sound great on toms. They sound great on acoustic guitar. And it's a dynamic mic. It's not a condenser. So it can handle really high volume stuff, but it also, sounds really good in general. So this is a great mic to get. If I was to suggest something specific, I would go with an SM7, a Mogami cable into a Neve 1073 500 series, which is like, I have one back here in a lunchbox. So those are $1,000. It's got 400 here, whatever, $60 for the cable, $1,000 for the mic pre, another 300 for the chassis, and then, an Apogee Duet or a UA Apollo. It's a lot of money, but for $3,000, you'd have a professional studio where if it doesn't sound good, it's you, it's not the gear, which is kind of what you wanted to get to. Is that the gear is working for you. It's transparent. You know that great records have been made on that stuff. So now it's like, it's up to you. You can't use the gear as an excuse anymore, which is kind of where you want to be.
And then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So all that, yes. However, the playback.
Mm-hmm. That's all that matters.
Right. What are you listening through?
Oh,
like
right. Yeah.
So that is I think that's probably the chink in the armor with
yeah.
vinyl.
So I missed that. I would go with actually the headphones I'm wearing. So these are Beyerdynamic 770s. These are great tracking headphones. So for vocals or drums or whatever, and they're really good mixing headphones, and they're cheaper than the equal level in speakers. The next level up, like these are, $170 or something, these headphones. And you can, as long as you're kind of, doing car checks and, checking on the laptop, checking on, the iPhone headphones or whatever it is, checking in multiple places, you can learn these headphones to the point where you can get really close with stuff, with the exception of maybe really low subs. And then the next level up for speakers, these Dyne Audio BM5s that I don't believe they make them anymore, but you can find them used. They're a couple $100 each, so $400 or $500 a pair. And that's a really good quality speaker, especially for the price. So yeah, good point. Thanks for grabbing that, because being able to hear correctly is huge. And what headphones do is they negate your room. And making a room sound good is super expensive. You might get lucky and just have a good sounding room, but you can easily spend $10,000 trying to make a room sound flat enough to really know what you're hearing. But then again, you can get used to spaces, and there are also other things you can get to put on your speakers that compensate for whatever low end or issues you have in your room or whatever. But headphones are the fastest way. I'm going way too deep into this, aren't I?
Yeah, that was intimidating.
Lots of numbers and gear and product names. Okay, so there's that. And then the next question, we'll both answer this. This is from my pal from songwriting class, another Biola fella, Isaac Meza Music. Who are some of your all-time favorite songwriters, artists, and mixing engineers? And who was your biggest musical influence growing up? So, man.
That you're not too embarrassed to mention.
Yeah, the growing up one brings up the embarrassing ones. So, favorite songwriters, I would say, I'm gonna put songwriters and artists, kind of mash them together. Definitely Sting. I would say the early Sting solo albums, but especially The Police also. He's probably the artist that inspired me to sing and write songs more than any other back in when I started doing that around 18, 19 years old. I just loved his sense of, there was always this balance of emotion, vulnerability, and intellect. And his ability lyrically to be poetic, yet direct, yet have, you know, a little bit of sarcasm sometimes too. And then musically, there's a dark dissonance to what he did in those days. You know, that he kind of brought. There was that reggae thing going on a little bit in the Police, but there was more, I think, of a darker classical edge to what he did, mixed with that voice and those intervallic melodies that just were badass, singing high and powerful. And then U2, I think, and Bono as a singer, like the best of the U2 songs, like, or at least the ones that I like the best, which are them, you know, Joshua Tree type stuff.
Right.
Peter Gabriel also, the So album.
You're gonna steal all mine.
And then Jeff Buckley was huge after that, for just somebody who pushed the boundaries of just pure passion and incredible singing. And his music exists completely out of time for me. Like if you throw that record on, you don't know what era it was made in. Sometime after the 70s is all you could say if I just put it on. Chris Cornell, for sure. Mainly his first solo album, Euphoria Morning. I started there, and then I went back to Soundgarden and was like, ooh, I love some of the Soundgarden stuff. And then a small number of the Audio Slave songs. But that one record, so Jeff Buckley, Grace, Chris Cornell, Euphoria Morning, those are my, and then Sting, maybe the Soul Cages. Those three records are like my Desert Island records.
10 Sumner's Tales for me. Yeah.
Really? That one's great too. I like Soul Cages because it's dark. It's all about his dad dying. There's something about that record. Anyway, so then I also love Rufus Wainwright. Great singer, great songwriter. What's another one? Those are the core ones, man. What about you?
Oof. My first go-to would be Glenn Phillips of Toad the Wet Sprocket.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, just...
Is that a recent love that has become like an all-time fave? Or have you always...
No, I bought every Toad record when they came out. This is like 91, I believe, is when they kind of hit.
Walk on the Ocean was their first hit, and then Dulcinea, I love that record. That's like their second or third record.
Yeah, I think that was like 93 maybe. And then I think by 97 they were done. That was their last album. And then fell off the face of the earth as far as I was concerned. And then possibly, I'd say within the last 3 years, I've discovered all the solo Glenn stuff that he had been doing post Toad. It's, you know, thank God for the internet, you know, to have access to all that.
Yeah, because he's very much a niche singer-songwriter now.
Yeah, but it was always, I think, omnipresent in my head as far as the haunting melodies and the subject matter and the depth of the lyrical poetry.
Yeah, he's just solid, man. Timeless.
Yeah, it's great.
And he's in the tradition of the classic singer-songwriter, too, which I kind of like.
I'm going to see him tomorrow night.
I know. I never responded to you. Dang it.
Driving up to Santa Barbara. But yeah, I think that was my first go-to. And then as you were naming all of the sort of...
classics.
Yeah, but they were that time period, too, where we were, like, when our friendship was first starting and we were all kind of into that stuff together. But I'm thinking before that, it sounds really weird, but like John Denver.
He's one of the greats, man. He gets a bad rap, kind of. But
and as far as artists, I don't know how much percentage he actually contributed to songwriting, but Karen Carpenter.
Oh.
Yeah. Just going that, I mean, those are the ones I grew up with. I remember my mom listening to those 8 tracks in her old Cadillac.
Yep.
And then even now it's a guilty pleasure. Like I'll put on a Carpenter's record or a John Denver record. Yeah. It's just amazing. And even watching some of that stuff on YouTube where it's just it's a live performance and it's just him and a guitar and just nailing it.
He's one of the old school greats, just man.
Nailing it. And then going
Is he Rocky Mountain High? Is that John Denver?
Okay. Yeah. And leaving on a
jet plane?
Jet plane and which was
didn't he write the Monkees?
Covered by no, that's Neil Diamond.
No, that's Neil Diamond.
I'd throw Neil Diamond in there too.
I always get them screwed up.
Yeah, so all these guilty pleasures like Neil Diamond, John Denver, Karen Carpenter. I think from an artist standpoint, like that, I would say those affected me. I don't know if influenced is right. Certainly Glenn is an influence, but
Yeah.
influence would be, I mean, everybody you named, like this 10 Sumner's Tales coming out was like, changed my world. That was like, all right.
Yeah.
And I've always been a fan of the Police.
Yep. Okay, now let's go guilty pleasure. We're both huge Rush fans from way back. And for some reason, there's embarrassment that comes with that because it's nerdy, but they were a huge influence on me in starting to play drums. And then I think that when you think about the Police and Rush coming together, you get this this compositional aesthetic that's like things are arranged, but things are also a little loose and punky. There's a rock element, but there's also a sense of things fitting together and almost a classical. That was Neil Peart, you know, like he played every time he played Tom Sawyer, it was all the same notes, all the same feel, very composed. And when you're a young drummer, it's like, especially from that era, it really appeals to you because it's just so, it's all the big drum set and all that stuff. But what I find really interesting is that Neil Peart talks about his approach to drumming, and he's like, I never step on the vocals. And ever since then, when I go back and listen to Rush, you think of him as a super busy drummer, but he always does it in the cracks.
You know, it's funny. I was just thinking about this while you're just saying that, is that I think because he composed what he played, he got away with playing a ton of notes. Where in a situation where you're
Flying
improvising,
off the handle, yeah,
if you're improvising like a Stuart Copeland, and when you play a lot of notes, you would characterize it as he's playing a lot of notes. And I never thought of Neil Peart as, okay, he's playing a lot of notes, because it's composed in such a way where there's no accidents. Like he's deliberately put that there for this reason, and it lines up with the bass part here, and then the vocal comes in. It's all...
Yeah, it's not Mitch Mitchell.
Yeah, there you go. That's a better example than Stuart Copeland.
Yeah, it's because you get the sense when a drummer's busy, it's almost like they get bored and they decide to be busy, and it doesn't matter what's going on musically. They're just like, oh, well, I just kind of feel like playing a lot right now. Especially like at a live gig, it's easy to be guilty of that, but... like Carter Beauford is a really musical drummer who, there was a period of time when that first Dave Matthews record came out, or technically the second record, Under the Table and Dreaming, where it was an influence because it had a lot of Police, it had a lot of singer-songwriter, it had a little bit of that arranged thing, and had that Cajun kind of influence with the violin. And Carter was a pretty busy drummer, but more busy in the sense that he was kind of always goofing around.
Right.
Always like always being playful.
The thing that really hit me about Dave Matthews Band when that came out, in fact, you showed me, before that album broke, you showed me, was it called These Two Things? Or Just Two Things?
Yeah, one of those.
It was the first album.
Yeah, with the peace sign hidden in the
schooner?
Yeah.
That's a Mallrats reference, sorry. But yeah, I had the pixelated novelty picture on the front.
Yeah, I found that record in the listening station at Tower Records before it blew up.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this?
That was crazy. I remember when you showed that to me. We were in a parking lot, I think at like Fry's Electronics or something. But I love the parameters. Like there's no electric guitar on this album. Mm-hmm. And there's something super cool about that.
Yeah, especially at that time. It was like 94.
Yeah, it's like, wow, that entertained me for, 45 to 50 minutes and no electric guitars.
Right. Yeah, they're a good band. Okay. Honorable mention, I would say for some more, there's definitely lots of Radiohead stuff I love. Coldplay has written some amazing songs. I like Chris Stapleton. Sam Phillips is an artist I love. She's a great kind of off the beaten path singer-songwriter.
I've never heard you mention her before.
Yeah.
I have a few albums that I bought early 90s. Sam Phillips.
There's an album, she used to be married to T-Bone Burnett. It's a great producer. and he produced her record called A Boot and a Shoe, and it's such a great record. It's just earthy and warm and delicate. There's string quartet on it, but there's something about it that the drummers, I think there's 2 drummers on some, Jay Bellerose and Jim Keltner, and it's like maracas, and they're playing really quiet, but the drums are huge sounding, so it's like this quiet, massive thing, and the songs are real
Are we
awesome.
talking about the same sample? I just want to make sure. Like the Indelible Wow? Like, is that what it's called? That album?
I don't know.
Like early 90s, right?
She used to be named Leslie Phillips. She used to be a Christian artist, and then she changed her name to Sam Phillips.
Could be talking about somebody else.
Could be.
Because I've never heard you mention.
She's blonde. She actually has done a little acting. She was in Die Hard 2 or something as a terrorist.
Well,
yeah. Maybe it's different.
I think the song I'm thinking of is What Do I Do?
Yeah, I think that's her.
And it's off Indelible Wow. Yeah. I think it's like a fuchsia looking album cover. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's the same artist. Yeah. Interesting.
I went and saw her live, and she had a string quartet playing with her that had played on her record, and that's the string quartet I ended up hiring to play on Murder Yesterday. Grabbed her string quartet. Paid the price too.
Is that the same group that did
the Section Quartet, they're called.
Mm.
But okay, so then shall we mixing engineers. Big fan of the kind of the big staples. I love Chris Lord-Alge is a great mixing engineer. He's almost like a trendy cliche answer, because there was a while there where I think it would be like late 90s throughout the early 2000s where he had such a strong aesthetic and people were going to him to get that he almost became a parody of himself. Like everybody found out just by listening to the records, but that he was using like the same kick sample on every rock record and the same snare sample that he had made. So he just replaced everybody's samples, but that sounded so good and it became the sound of rock. But, he, for example, mixed, Green Day, American Idiot, and a million other things, but he's also mixed country albums and I've had a chance to work with him maybe 4 different times on records, like Jesse McCartney record, a couple Jeremy Camp records he mixed on, and then the Cherry Bomb record. And it's really cool to see him work. Big SSL. He's great. Jack Joseph Puig, who did some of the mixing on my Fallborn record. Love him. I don't go deep into being a fanboy of engineers, I guess.
I don't think I could.
It's more I just
I
like
could
certain
name
sounds
one.
and certain records.
Yeah, I know those producers that I've always been drawn to their sense of aesthetic.
Yeah.
Mainly just from the Rush era, like the Terry Brown.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's like and you heard it change. Like they changed producers and then boom, all of a sudden it's Peter Collins, right? Peter Collins. And then I think Peter Collins did the Queensryche record as well, didn't he?
Sounds familiar. Yeah, Empire,
yeah. And what's funny is going back now and listening to those albums, they sound small compared to the Terry Brown stuff from Moving Pictures and Permanent Waves.
It's all context, man. They sound small, but they're very there's lots of reverbs, and they sound huge when you're listening to them, and then you put something else on, and it's bigger, and you're like, oh, weird. It's like an audio illusion.
I mean,
Another one.
I was just going to say that for me, like the benchmark for just putting headphones on and listening to something, it's Moving Pictures.
That record sounds great.
It's just when Limelight hits and that floor tom comes in off the guitar.
I wish I could go back in a time machine and just turn up the low end on the bass and then remaster it with a little more subs. And then
you grew to have an opinion.
I know exactly. No, it's really good sounding. And then another honorable mention, I would say Spike Stent is another great mixer. Okay. But there's another thing you said. Biggest musical influence growing up. Oh, and then, I didn't want to forget to mention this. Thomas Newman is one of my favorite music composers ever.
Yep.
Maybe, I mean, if I could pick one composer just to listen to for the rest of my life, I would probably choose Thomas Newman. Especially the Shawshank Redemption soundtrack. Road to Perdition. Oh, those two soundtracks are unbelievable.
Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo. Such greats. Wall-E.
6 Feet Under.
6 Feet Under, yeah. He wrote the theme to that.
That's great.
He's ridiculous. To me, he's the sound of like music reaching the highest spiritual level of just holy crapness. Like when I'm going through something, or I remember times earlier in life going through breakups and just throwing Thomas Newman this on and just like driving through the canyon, like being all bummed out and thinking about life. Okay, so next question. Oh, Nikki Bird, what's up? What's more common for you, writing music first or writing lyrics first? Do you have a favorite way to write? All right. More common for me, I would say music first. And from there, I'd say like intention first. It's like...
Do you mumble babble?
I mumble babble. Yeah, I try to like get the subconscious working. So I'll just kind of come up with something musically or have a melody, but usually kind of both at the same time-ish. And then press record and try to just disappear into improvisation. And while improvising, I just let myself suck. So I'll kind of explore through even singing poorly, or just kind of just going around and seeing what's possible emotionally with, I find there's a lot of emotive power in the vowel sounds and tonalities and range. So I'll just kind of go around and look and find, and then if I feel like something happened, I'll go back and listen to it. And often there will be some words that are actually matching the intention or something. I'll have said something often, and then lyrics will start to come from that. And then it's all, I love Stephen King has a great way of describing the creative process that really matches what I'm trying to describe in his book called On Writing. So it's super awesome. It's like his only, nonfiction book. And it's like a biography mixed with how his process. And he talks about the creative process as being like excavating a skeleton. So you're digging in the dirt and you're like, oh, there's a bone right there. And then you dig more and you use the larger tools at first. And then the closer you get to the skeleton, you start to get out like the toothbrush, and you start to like...
That's great.
And then you might find that there's only a leg bone. And then you're like, oh, that's all that was. But other times you're like, holy crap, it's an entire Tyrannosaurus Rex that I've just unearthed. And that'd be like your ultimate opus. But it's the perfect analogy.
It is.
Because you really are uncovering something.
Can you attach, I think this is really important for that question, can you attach a timeline to that? So this whole thing you're talking about, and I've seen you do this in a day, where it's like there's nothing, and then by 5 p.m. it's mixed and mastered and in my inbox. So it's like, is that normal? What's the normal process?
I would say that's normal. Normal is probably something like 5 or 6 hours, and it's the song is either everything but the bridge is written, or maybe the whole thing, and it's recorded 80 to 90%, and sometimes that one day, which would be maybe a longer day, it's done. Especially like on the Way Out record, there are a handful of songs that are like the one day, and it was the mix from that day also. That's probably a result of doing it so much and trusting instinctual things, but I think it also just happens to be my creative process is trying to turn on that improvisational thing and let go and be really decisive. And then, but there are definitely other songs, a pretty sizable percentage of ones that I'll toil over or that I'll write half of it.
What would be the average timeline there?
I would say it's still for the writing. It rarely goes beyond like 2 days of writing.
Yeah, that's what I figured. That's
like
pretty
hitting it
fascinating.
hard and then revisiting it once. Right. But I just feel like you're not digging into the subconscious if you're thinking too much about it and second guessing and rewriting and
right.
all the rewriting I've done tends to be more when somebody else is asking for something, or we're trying to write a hit, or when we're trying to fit something into a box, and it takes a lot of second guessing and we're getting notes. But when it comes to expressing myself, once I learned how to do it and had gotten hundreds of songs under my belt, it's become a more concise process of cutting out the fat.
Do you make or reserve time where that is your sole purpose until you've completed whatever the tasks are? Like, let's say you're making an album. Do you, just trying to get a picture of, are you writing and then you're off to Home Depot to buy a hammer and then you're doing some other thing around the house? or do you have a sequestering like process where it's like, I'm making an album, so there's no practical sort of home life happening, like you're in the studio and you finish the album? Or how does that work for you? Are you able to turn that on and off?
Well, I mean, I would say it's usually been a sequestered thing. And a lot of that has to do with how I worked really hard to make my life so that I could have, in my studio was near my house and I could kind of go out, into my own space and just basically lock myself in there and go as long as I needed to go until it was done. And I think if there were more distractions, then that would make that hard to let go, and it'd be a process that would be hard to allow myself to dive into. And then I've also created my studio in such a way and set it up so that nothing is a long setup. Like, I've really made an attempt to make sure that if I want to record drums, it's a few patch cables, maybe setting up a mic or two, but it's kind of ready to go so that I don't have to get out of that creative or that more abstract headspace and think too much. It's kind of I'm ready to go. And then, but I will say that I love the idea of writing and then going like, okay, I've written the verse and chorus. I'm going to go start recording the song now so that I can be inspired by the sound of it. I don't segregate those two processes. I don't go like, I need to write the song and finish it, then record it. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, I got it. I'm gonna actually do the drum take for the entire song and just improvise something on the bridge and then write to my improvised drums. Or if it's a guitar song, maybe I'll write the bridge on piano. Like, I try to swirl everything together because I know the end result is going to be one thing. It's going to be a sound, a production, the song, all integrated into one process. So or one final result. So if I can make the process as integrative as possible, then it's going to feel like this song couldn't sound any different. It couldn't possibly have a different drum groove. It couldn't, whatever. A lot of times when you hear songs that are written, say, as like an acoustic guitar song and that's it, and then you hear the production, there's a disjointed quality to it where it's like, oh, well, it could have been that sound or it could have been that sound. But if you integrate the processes, your choice for the drum sound is so driven by the song that it becomes inseparable, almost like a classical piece where the arrangement is as much the composition as the composition is the arrangement, whatever.
Yeah, hearing that answer and how you do sort of sequester yourself, it's super apparent. I was thinking, like, I was imagining while you were speaking the creation of Way Out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about that album that sounds like it was recorded in one session, just straight through. I don't know what that is, or if that's something that was. I mean, obviously it's deliberate because it's an album, but the everything belongs. There's nothing that sticks out. There's no anomaly in that album. It's super fascinating to hear.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's super cool. And that's not saying that it would be necessarily bad if there were anomalies on an album. It's just hearing you describe the process sounds like an exact description of what I imagine Way Out being.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if it's interesting, but it makes me think of the fact that album was, I'm going to listen to the music that's just in me at the moment I sit down to write. I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to think about what I want to say or even what I'm going through. I'm not going to intellectualize anything. I'm just going to sit down and let whatever's in there come out and then follow the idea until it's done and then let it be done. And that concept was something that I took from the Philip Glass documentary. It's called Glass, where he, poetry is about speaking, dancing is about movement, music is about listening. He said, I don't think about music, I listen to it and write it down. So I thought about, what would be my process if I took that simplistic a philosophy and just said, it isn't about what I want to do, it isn't about any sort of thought process other than sitting down and going like right now it'd be like, and I would just take that. That's the first thing that came to my head, and I would just find something, follow that. It's just literally, it's almost like I'm just going to drive out to the desert, park my car, and go on a hike. As opposed to I'm going to sit down, call up a travel agent, decide where should I go, and plan it all out. It's just total free form. Whereas my other albums are more about, here's a 1.5 to 2 year chunk of my life. Here's all the songs that happened. And I think I mentioned this in the other podcast, but I want to have gone through kind of a little bit of everything in that period. And that feels like an album to me. I've been super bummed out. I've felt extreme joy. I've gone through all the different core things I can go through. And then now, okay, that's a period of my life. Here it is, represented in music. On to the next period.
Right. I wanted to touch on the Philip Glass documentary.
Yeah, it's so good.
I haven't watched it in a couple years. Just a note, I was only able to find it on YouTube.
It's on iTunes.
I couldn't find. Is it on iTunes?
It is, yeah.
Maybe back then I wasn't as knowledgeable with the programming on iTunes, or maybe it wasn't on there back then. This is like maybe 3 years ago. I think I watched it. 2 or 3 years ago, but I couldn't find it anywhere else. So it's highly recommend people check that out.
Yeah, it's fascinating in multiple ways. Just to see a person who, as much as I connected to it, I also felt like I was watching an alien as well, because the very beginning of the documentary, he goes, I don't care what anybody thinks about my music. There's plenty of music out there. If you don't like mine, go listen to the Beatles or whatever. There's plenty of great, I've never had a problem worrying about what other people think. I'm like, wow. I don't sit around wondering what people are going to think of the thing I'm making, but once I make it, I definitely care if people like it. So the way his ego is constructed is like an alien to me. Like when you watch it, and even when he does a lot of film composing. So there's that part in there where Woody Allen is saying that Philip Glass is one of the few composers that if you tell him something's not working, he just goes, okay, fine. And then he'll give you 3 new cues the next day. Whereas most composers will be like, you don't like that? And try to fight for it, or him and Ha about having to redo something. And Philip Glass is just, I think he takes that, I just listen to music to heart. And he's like, okay, you don't like that? I'll use it for something else. I'll just listen to music again and then write it down, and hopefully you'll like that. He's just such a free spirit. But he's also an endless wanderer, like spiritually. He's like trying out different religions as if they're outfits in a way. Highly intellectual guy, but he also has a lifestyle that's sort of integrated too. Like they show him with his kids, and I don't know, it's fascinating.
Yeah, that cabin. I remember we were talking about that cabin scene.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's cool. All right, there's a few more questions. Let's hit them. What's up, Caitlin? Also known as @Aselda_music. Do you feel that instrumentation /harmonic /melodic foundation, the instrumentation, harmonic, melodic foundation of a song needs to support the lyrics or vice versa? Which do you start with when trying to convey a specific emotion? So this connects to the earlier question, but so do I feel like the musical aspects and sonic aspects of something need to support the lyrics? The answer is yes and no. It's completely case by case. I think it's the gut feeling of whether or not you want to create juxtaposition or
Yeah, there's a
cohesiveness.
There's a marching world, I think, parallel to this, and that is visual first, music first, or even just in the music realm, battery first or pit first. And it really is. It's contextual. I've done it every possible way and been extremely happy with the results using every possible method. So I think it's just finding the method that works for that particular thing you're trying to convey.
The main thing I think is self-confidence in following your instincts, because there is no right or wrong way. But there probably is a right or there probably is a way that you as an artist would gravitate towards more often than not. So just because I sat here saying that lyrics tend to follow music and you know, a subconscious style of trying to lose myself in improvisation, by no means am I saying that that's the right way to do it, or that if somebody who likes writing lyrics first, I mean, I go back and forth on this because a song isn't a poem. A song is music with lyrics, and so I tend to think that if you do start with a completely finished written lyric and then try to make it into music, that it can tend to be square peg, round hole. You can tend to have issues, and you can kind of hear it in music when people do that because certain words will clunk melodically, but I don't know.
Like Africa by Toto.
Yeah. There's some clunkers in there. Serengeti.
Jinx. There's some. I was laughing too because there's some Rush albums that are just like awful.
That's a perfect example, actually, of when that can go wrong. Is that Neil Peart handed Getty the lyrics.
Well, I didn't start noticing it until the '90s, and
yeah, because
you go back and listen to the '70s and '80s stuff, it works. And then they hit the '90s.
I wonder what went wrong.
Like, whoa, that didn't fit at all. Like,
I bet it had to do with
lyric in there.
I bet it had to do with Neil getting deeper into his literature. He just started probably paving new territory, and it was just less singable.
Right.
I don't know, but yeah, there's no right or wrong way for that. But
just don't use Serengeti, and you're good.
Yeah. Okay. But when you say, the harmonic instrumentation, melodic foundation needs to support the lyrics, yeah, I think there should be some sort of marriage there that you feel.
It's intent, because it could be ironic or juxtaposed,
completely,
or it could be in alignment.
Yeah.
So what was your intent? If you do something, if something happens that wasn't your intent, again, like the gear, like that's your red flag.
And it's chicken or the egg. Here's a perfect example. A recent session I had with a student, this came up where what happened was the music was written, the melodies were written, and then the lyrics were written and rewritten, and where the lyric ended up started to feel pretty sarcastic, confrontational, and a little bit dark. And the initial music under it had been written, and it felt pretty hopeful and almost inspirational. So as the lyric morphed, all of a sudden the music started to feel like it was the wrong music. But since it was kind of like, well, here's our music, and then we could have just accepted it. And I was like wondering, like, something's wrong right now with this chorus. And I kind of did that 30,000 foot way zoom out, and I'm like, oh, there's a complete mismatch here. And I just brought it up and said, is that on purpose? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because it almost feels, it doesn't match up, and the result is irony. And I don't know if we want that. So we ended up changing the chords to kind of feel darker, and it ended up working better. So I guess just awareness of how it fits is being able to zoom in and zoom out is just a huge skill. Ooh, Ian Grom, what's up, man? Late to the party. Wah, wah. I would have asked. Oh, you are asking. What are some of your favorite surprise twists in form or chord progressions that made a famous song extra memorable or impactful to you? Ooh, so something influential.
Everything Radiohead's ever written.
Yeah.
With a little slight bit of sarcasm there.
Yeah, I would say that.
Ian, you got to get on this podcast.
Yeah,
you gotta
man.
Get you over here.
We need you over here.
For take 2.
Well, once you said Radiohead, one thing came to mind, which was the beautifully sly way that Karma Police chord progression goes in and out of 2, possibly 3 different keys. Can you hand me that guitar?
Here's my dog.
I love that, and that's something that in Sam Phillips's music I really love, is that she has a way of jumping in and out of keys that if you get yourself in a great melodic mindset is super cool. So Karma Police is like so you have this like, and then it's not in the same key, and then happy, and then key change. So it takes you all these really cool places in that chord progression. Yeah, Radiohead is one, and then rhythmically, any of us who are drummers who were alive in the 80s know that Spirits in the Material World,
dude, that song
screwed us
pissed me
all up.
off.
It's all because it's not it's the fill at the beginning.
Exactly. He does it. You know he does it on purpose.
So that
I always heard that as wait. Boom 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 boom.
one.
Yeah,
Not there?
That's not where it is. Yeah.
No, you sang it right, I think, just now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's it.
What it is. Oh, I can't hear it like that.
I mean, how old is that when that came out? It was like 8?
I don't think it matters. I think it
9?
would happen to us today,
But my
too.
poor 8-9-year-old brain got duped by the Stewart.
It's just not fair.
No, it's not.
But that's influenced me because it's nice. It's it's nice to when you're not just trying to confuse a listener, but you're actually trying to make them feel unsettled and like they don't quite know where they're to put their feet, because emotionally that's what you want to bring them to.
You know, In the Air Tonight does that with the programmed
Right. Yeah.
drum beat at the very beginning.
Yep.
And you don't know where the downbeat is until, at least I didn't. I think I was 10 when that came out. I didn't know where the downbeat was until he started singing.
Both of those are the drummers.
Yeah, the damn drummers.
Drummer's fault.
Yeah. Hey, just a quick follow-up to Ian, or maybe just a clarification. How would you answer that question in the context of like a popular song, like something that isn't Radiohead or Sam Phillips, but something that's more mainstream?
You know, there's a cheesy one that comes to mind because I remember wondering what was going on and learning it on guitar, but it's a famous country song, and it's by Lone Star. It's Amazed. Baby, I'm amazed by you. That song. It changes keys in like 3 times, I think, and it's very much like Def Leppard style, like key changes. But that one is like just it keeps just going, yeah, no, yeah, yeah. So check out that song, Baby. I think it's just called Amazed, but that one's funny. But I would say the entire Euphoria Morning album, Chris Cornell, is littered with surprises that just inspire me, because it feels like how you feel when you're wondering whether or not life is even real, and you're dealing with the darker moments in life. That album is such a representation of that, and especially songs like Follow My Way, and Steel Rain and Disappearing One. Those songs have chord progressions that are just genius. And a lot of that is owed to Alan Johannes.
Oh, yeah.
Guitar player.
Yeah, I love his stuff. I was thinking of, as a kid, I used to listen to Walk the Line. Johnny Cash does that for me. How it just keeps shifting.
Yep. I use it as an example in my songwriting class.
Yeah.
It does every range. It starts
right.
The
and
last
he holds
chorus.
the note out.
Yeah.
It's so hip and cool and unexpected, and just a folk country tune.
This might not be correct, but it starts an octave up, where the main note he's hitting is a C. It goes down a fifth, back up a third, and then I think down another fifth, and then ends an octave lower. But you don't really realize it because it's like stepping like that. But if you just click the end of the song and then click the beginning, it's like, holy crap, he's taking us through an entire octave and I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Whereas the last one's...
I think that's probably... I know there's no real surprise chord in there.
Because you're mine.
But that one always did it for me. I'm like, man, that is freaking brilliant. That's
it is
super cool. And it's super sly too. Like it's... You can just be a complete, musical midget and not even know that stuff's happening. Just enjoy the song. It doesn't take you for a spin.
Yeah, but it's the ultimate. Cool. I use it as an example of contrast purely with the range of the vocal, because everything else in the song is like pretty. It's like doesn't change. The one thing that does, it's almost like he started at the end and went, "How low is the lowest note I can sing?" All right, here's the key of the song. Let's start an octave up. No. All right. Is there? Okay, let me look at Broken City, the other Instagram, because I sent out put out the bat signal.
Next time we're in Brea, we'll have to kidnap Ian.
Yeah.
Bring him in.
I had laryngitis recently. I'm not deliberately talking low. Okay.
Yeah, we missed a week too. I had to. I had a little evacuation deal at home with the rains that we had, and we had a fire in August, and there were mudslide warnings, and
whoa,
yeah, because there's no vegetation.
So are you saying that you've seen fire and you've seen rain?
Nope, I didn't see anything. I saw possibly a.
You've been notified of fire and you've been notified of rain.
I think they were just being extremely proactive, and but we bailed out for a few days and we missed a podcast. But hopefully we're back on track to do these things weekly.
Yes, we are. There she is.
You better tell people you're holding a dog. That's gonna sound really weird.
Yeah, that's right. For those of you listening, I'm holding a dog, a canine unit. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll be back very soon with more guests and more long meandering conversations about stuff. Good night and good morning, and be good.